NFL Super Wild Card Weekend. Erik joins me. We've made it to the playoffs. Erik, I thought some really interesting playoff matchups, just as far as storylines. We can go through each game and talk about how there's dramatic storylines, mainstream narrative stuff to play into it. A couple things on the big picture as we head into the wild card weekend here. We had two different teams that finished last in their division last year, and they're in the playoffs this year. The Texans and the Browns, they both play against each other in this first game that we're going to talk about, the opening game on Saturday. In 20 of the last 21 years, at least two teams have won their division the season after they missed the playoffs. Happened again this year. The Lions and the Texans both missed the playoffs last year, both win the division this year. How about the Packers, Rams, and Bucks were all at least 3 games under 500 at some point this season. It's the first time in history that 3 different teams all made the playoffs in the same year after being 3 or more games under 500 at one point. And we have the AFC North as the first division since 1935 to have every single team finish above 500. Some big picture thoughts, news, and notes as we get set to preview all 6 of these games for Super Wildcard Weekend. We'll be looking at the betting lines here at DRF Sportsbook. Remember, if you're in the state of Iowa, you can sign up now for a DRF Sportsbook account. Erik, 2 teams will have buys, and that'll be the number 1 seeded Baltimore Ravens in the AFC, the number 1 seeded San Francisco 49ers in the NFC. Our promo code for all of you in Iowa, still the same, FAST300. That'll get you the deposit match bonus. Okay, buddy, let's start us off. Cleveland Browns at Houston Texans. This is the Deshaun Watson trade teams here. And there's no Watson playing. Isn't it funny how much better this team, the Browns, got after they got rid of Watson? And I say got rid of, he got hurt. He's not playing. But this team was struggling through a lot of the early year, even with their good defense, because they really weren't sure what they were going to get from Watson. Now they have Joe Flacco, about to be 39-year-old Joe Flacco, coming off the couch. And he has been, honestly, he's probably playing better than he did the last 6 years that we saw him play, Erik. It's been really amazing to see.
And I mean, that just kind of preaches to the genius of Stefanski, how he's able to scheme and get people open, and it really doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Playing quarterback. And it kind of makes you think this whole time we've been drilled in our heads, hey, you got to start for the quarterback position. The Browns are kind of against that rule because you look at what they've been able to do. They're maybe mainly centric to their defense. And we all know it's a copycat league. Maybe we'll see teams now not overpay for these quarterbacks, look to get the defensive studs like the Browns have in Myles Garrett, get a good DC and Jim Schwartz, and kind of build through that. In terms of this game, you know, we do have a couple of quarterbacks. There's 3 of them making their first start at in a playoff game against a quarterback who has multiple starts. That is CJ Stroud, Mason Rudolph, and Tua. Quarterbacks making their first start against a quarterback that has playoff experience, 17-35 against a number that's only 32.6%. Something to remember. Now, also, home teams getting 2.5 or less, 7-2-1 ATS since 2005 in the wild card round. But when they're getting 3 or less, only 9-8-2. So it's kind of weird. The smaller the number, the more these home teams are covering. Huge experience factor, obviously. And the question when you look at this game, we need to ask yourself is this game too big for the upstart Texans, who, let's face it, they're ahead of schedule? Are they going to be able to make the plays? Because everyone talks about it. Playoff football is way different. And it's something that can't be explained until you actually experience it.
So they're the first team in NFL history to win a division with the rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback who made at least 10 starts. Never happened before. We've had playoff teams, right? They've teams that have gotten in as a wild card, but never a division winner like this. And You're spot on. And you look at the records overall in the playoffs, rookie quarterbacks are 4-11, but that's not even actual as bad as it is, because 2 of those wins came in games when the 2 rookies were playing each other. So a rookie had to win in those games. And the other 2 wins came last year from Brock Purdy. So it seemed they've been better more recently, but your point is spot on. This is difficult. I'll kind of counter my own and say, last week for them, it was basically a playoff game against Indy, right? They needed to win that game to get in. So they've been in a situation kind of already where they were up for that game. It was a huge game. They couldn't make mistakes, but they're going to be playing against a fantastic defense here. This is going to be a lot different.
Yeah. And what I'm doing here is I don't have a side on this. I don't think I'm going to play a side. What I did is I took Amari Cooper over 73.5 receiving yards. Last game, 15 targets, 11 receptions, 265. Texans allow the 10th highest catch rate and to opposing wide receivers and the 2nd highest amongst active playoff teams. Important to note, Texans play the majority of zone coverage. Cooper averages 2.79 yards per route ran against zone coverage. Texans are the worst team in the playoffs defending the deep ball. We've seen Cooper be a field stretcher a little bit. Flacco takes some shots down the field with them. Texans are 23rd DVOA defending the pass and 32nd DVOA defending opposing wide receiver ones. They've been stout all year against the run. It was kind of weird that game against the Colts, what Taylor and Moss both had exceptional games. I think they're going to be able to throw here. I think this is going to be a big Cooper game. So I'm going to take Amari Cooper over the 73.5 yards. Maybe if the Browns get down early and I can get a bet like a plus 105, plus 110 on them to win the game live, I'll look to do that. But in terms of pre-flop action, I'll only take Cooper over the 73.5.
Yeah, I texted you early in the week, right when this game popped up, and it was at 2.5, and I was able to catch it right then. And I played the Texans at plus the 2.5, and I sprinkled a little bit on the money line here. Going to go through a few different notes. Also, what I like to see from them last week after that long Colts drive for a field goal, the Texans' first offensive snap of the game, boom, 75-yard touchdown pass, and they really leaned on Collins, who had 9 catches, 194 yards. He had 5 first downs and 4 catches for at least 15 yards. He forced 3 missed tackles with the ball in his hands. With the game tied, Stroud completed all 7 of his attempts for 82 passing yards to take the lead, go-ahead touchdown drive, end up winning the game there. He was the 5th 4,000-yard passing season for a rookie in NFL history. He had a perfect passer rating on play-action passes last week, going 6 of 7 for 143 yards. Now, this is so funny. 22-year-old Stroud versus about to be 39-year-old Flacco in this game. We have guys that are almost half each other's age.
The thing is, like, are we going to be looking at this in a week and saying, Jesus Christ, were we really having Flacco as a favorite here against Stroud, who looks to be like the next legit talent in the NFL?
Or was it as simple as rookie versus a veteran who's been there?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Flacco's been there. He's done this a million times. This is still going to be brand new for Stroud. They're 2-2. The Texans are against the spread as a home dog this year. Overall, they were the number 12 team in DVOA, 14 offense, number 10 passing, number 30 rushing. You pointed out on their defense where they do struggle is against the pass. They're very good. They were number 2 defending the run, even with that game where they struggled last week. It's kind of funny because this Browns team, we think about them as a run team, but they haven't been a very good running team this year since Chubb went down. They've had offensive line issues. They've had to start 3 different tackles, I believe. They've had to start 5 different quarterbacks. To me, it's just amazing that in a season when they started 5 different quarterbacks, Chubb got hurt, O-line issues, they were actually able to sit their starters in week 18. They had a playoff spot locked up. That's amazing. That's incredible.
Speaks to the brilliance of Stefanski.
It is. And you know what I love what you're doing right now? You and I have been hard on Stefanski when he's deserved it. And all year long, we've given him credit when he's deserved it. Because that's what you have to do. Last year and in prior years, I don't think he you could sort of tell he didn't like Baker. He didn't handle the situation well with him. And there were a lot of times I don't think he put Baker in a spot to succeed, and Baker kind of gave it back to him. And now, look, it's funny. When both of those guys went their separate ways, they both did very well this year. Gave like a very good version of themselves. Stefanski, what he did with all these different quarterbacks. Baker, what he was able to do getting Tampa to the playoffs. Flacco comes out of nowhere. So he plays in 4 games. He plays in 5 games. 1,600 passing yards in 5 games, but he still hasn't been quite as good as the narrative. A lot of bad decisions or interceptions waiting to be. He had 8 interceptions and 4 fumbles in his 5 starts, but only one of those fumbles was lost. So they got a little lucky on the fumble luck, which doesn't sustain. But a couple guys that you may want to look at. Njoku was also a monster, Eric, with Flacco. Flacco really seemed to open up Njoku's upside in his ability. 39 targets, 28 catches, and 370 yards in weeks 14 through 17 for Njoku. Incredible. Now, why I'm worried about them on the road with margin. I just pointed out Flacco and some of the turnovers there. They've struggled to run the ball a little bit all year long, and their defense has been much better at home than on the road. In fact, on the road this year, they're 2-5-1 against the spread, and they're 1-2 ATS as a road favorite. Some really bad defensive road splits too, where there were a few games where they just got lit up. Even a game against the Colts that they won, they allowed a ton of points in that game and tons of yardage. Overall, this team is number 8 DVOA, number 28 offense, but the number 2 defense, number 2 against the pass, number 4 against the run. They're really tough overall. But can they put a little pressure on them? They've lost 3 different tackles this year. Fun game, Eric. I locked it in at 2.5. You've got Cooper. I'm going to probably look for some Njoku. I'll probably throw him into at least one DFS lineup or 2. And, give a shout out to Collins. He's one of those guys who he didn't have anything close to a year like this before. And I'm not going to just completely give Stroud all the credit for it. On his passing or his receiving grades, you can see he's been very, very good. It hasn't been just Stroud. So this team is young, and I will point out something you always mention. You got to give credit from the top down. You and I, we were wrong about a lot of things this year in our preseason preview. We were right about a lot of things. The Texans were one of them. We were super high on them. We were on their overs. I had their adjusted over. I think we even threw some, I know you might have, I threw a little on them, big price to win the division. So some teams we struggled with, but felt like this team was going to be, I don't know about here, but definitely ahead of schedule. And now they're hosting a playoff game with a legitimate chance to win a playoff game. That's awesome for them with a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, it's way ahead of schedule. Great for the town of Houston, which has struggled so much. And, just kind of shows what happens when you have the right leadership intact. And also, speaking of that, if the Texans would have told Lovie Smith last year, hey, don't play these certain peoples, and they lost that game,
they end up with Bryce Young instead.
The whole draft. Well, who knows? Maybe they did have Stroud as their number 1. We don't know who they graded as the better quarterback, but it's a potential that Stroud wouldn't be there because they had Young placed higher. They probably wouldn't have made the trade for Will Anderson. So it just kind of shows you how big that game actually was.
Are they going to have the offensive and defensive rookie of the year?
They very well could. I don't think so, though. I think Puka is actually
because of the numbers.
Yeah,
because those are the 2. Puka and Stroud both have legitimate cases, I think. And then because it seems like Carter slowed down a little bit, right? Earlier in the year, he was looking more dominant, and he had some more of the counting stats. But late in the year, it was more Will Anderson. The guy from the Rams played pretty well down the stretch too, Turner. So he's not probably at the level with the other guys, but amazing that this Texans team has a shot to have both of the rookies of the year, offense and defense. Their coach is going to be right in line for coach of the year. And I'm sure their offensive coordinator, he's probably going to be a head coach somewhere next year. Bobby Slowick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but the thing is like I was playing around with it last night. There's not many job openings. I thought there'd be a lot more.
Me too. And you sort of now see that there's still some big names out there right now, and who knows what Belichick's going to do. I think some people will probably wait to see what he's going to do, and then the dominoes may fall after that.
Also, like, if the Eagles underachieve, they could make it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Sirianni.
If the Cowboys underachieve.
Cowboys, Eagles, Bills. If those teams were to lose their first game, that could be something that would happen for them.
Oh, easily.
Right away. So,
if it's just one of those things, like you kind of look at the big thing. I mean, what are the Packers, Chargers, Raiders, Titans, Panthers, Commanders. I mean, that's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 open jobs, right? I'm not missing one. I mean, and the Pats already put Mayo in there.
Yep.
So that's 6 open jobs. You figure, the Raiders too. Did I already say Raiders? Yeah, I already said Raiders.
You said Raiders. And then maybe 1 or 2 from the playoffs.
Yeah, maybe. I think maybe 1 if there's like an early exit they can get Belichick. But I mean, the Raiders should retain Pierce. Oh, I think the Titans go. I think the Titans go with Slowick because they're trying to become San Francisco East.
Yeah, you're right. They could do that. They could do that. That would make sense for them. Okay, let's move to game 2 on Saturday. We've got the Dolphins and the Chiefs here. So these two teams, as did the Browns and the Texans, they played a few weeks ago. The Browns and Texans did, but remember, Case Keenum started that game. The Dolphins and the Chiefs played earlier this year in Frankfurt. But this game, Eric, is supposed to be one of the, if not the coldest game on record in NFL history. Currently, the temperature, when I was looking last night and reading through, the feels like temperature was supposed to be negative 25 by game time, and it's scheduled to be actually 2 degrees.
Love it.
And the Dolphins, just a very basic statistic, they've lost their last 10 games when the temperature is 40 degrees or lower at kickoff. Is 2 degrees lower than 40?
No, it's a little bit of a difference.
Because I'm one of the biggest drama queens, and I am a wuss when it comes to weather. And we've actually gotten under 40 out here in the last couple nights, like 38, 39, which is really chilly. But it's going to be 2 in this game. You kind of feel bad for the Dolphins, though, because it does feel a little bit like last year where they make the playoffs and they're really, really banged up when they get in here. They are, who knows what the health of Waddle will be, because Waddle and Mostert both missed last week. Hill is banged up. And those aren't even the issues that I'm worried about the most. Their defense, Chubb, Phillips, Howard, Van Ginkel, Baker, all either done for the year or badly banged up. And just 2 weeks ago, their entire offensive line wasn't practicing. And they could be without both of their starting safeties in this game. All of that. That's why this game is, of all of them, probably one of the most difficult for me to make a play in, because I do not think the Chiefs should be favored with margin at all based on what they've done this year. But I'm very, very concerned about the overall health of Miami and what things may look like for them if they get down. Because I really got to give you credit again for this, Eric. You've stood really strong when you watch film. You do this, I do this, but we all have to remember, when you watch film, you're going to notice things that are different than what the results of games might say. So teams are winning sometimes, players are racking up stats, but when you're watching film, you and I might be able to, and other people that I follow along, and I see how they interpret film, and then I can learn at what people are looking at sometimes, and it really helps me. And you could always watch with Tua that he's doing certain things really well. He gets the ball out of his hand quick. He anticipates. He hits he leads guys. He throws them open sometimes. He puts the ball in a great spot. But when you play him multiple times, you can start to really know how to defend him and get a feel for him. I thought you would really appreciate this reference. I was reading an article from The Ringer, and it said all this about Tua. He has not been great in his biggest games in the NFL where he's gotten beat up. His chance to make the playoffs in 2021, his chance to clinch it in 2022, and then this year, all of those years, Buffalo twice, Kansas City, Baltimore, not nearly as good. His EPA per dropback since 2002, it gets worse every month of the year, and he's had his lowest success rate in December in all of his years so far. He's great on the first 15 plays of the game. Then the rest of the game, he drops off in yards per dropback, EPA per dropback, and success rate. And this doesn't matter if you're talking home or away. Home games month by month drops to the lowest mark in December, as well as his yards per dropback. When the offense is on script, he is performing at MVP levels. When the offense goes off that script and off the first 15 plays, he's actually below average, like slightly below average. This line was the one that I loved, and it really kind of stands out. The comparison from the guy from The Ringer said he's like a pitcher who only has one or two good pitches. So the first time you face him, he gets you. The second time you face him, you start to size him up. If you face him the third time, you're going to hit a home run because he doesn't throw the ball hard enough or have enough different looks to really beat you over and over. It was a fascinating article, and I think it pointed out a lot of the things that you mentioned about Tua over the last few years. It's not that you don't like Tua. It's not that you have a personal problem with Tua. There are things that you've noticed that will probably be hard for him to sustain at a high level when you get deeper in more important games. This is exactly what that said, and it had all the numbers to frank that point.
I mean, that's whoever wrote that, spot on, man. Spot on. In terms of this game, Tua's from Hawaii. He plays in Miami. There is when I did my notes, they said a 43% chance of snow. Right now on weather.com, it says 24% chance of snow and is going to be -11 with a 13-mile-per-hour wind chills at -23. The Dolphins will be without Bradley Chubb and Phillips, their two best pass rushers. Their answer signed Justin Houston's been sitting on the couch. Obviously, that's going to be huge because we've seen Mahomes struggle this year when he gets pressure in his face. I don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to create enough pressure throughout the game to make Mahomes uncomfortable. Also, Miami is 30th DVOA defending the tight end. One would think this would be a great matchup with Kelsey because what do? Do you put Ramsey on Kelsey? If that's the case, he can just out physical. So I really don't think they have any answer to guard Kelsey. And if they do, I think what will they do? Bracket coverage, and that would just open up everything else.
And he has the week off too. His body should be a little more ready for this. You know, he was banged up all year. His numbers, you look back at his overall season and it's like, wow, he still hit those numbers, but you could see it physically. And he told them last week, hey, I'm going to take this week off, which I like. I like that he told them, hey, I need this. Let me get my body right. And that's exactly the matchup I think is going to be really difficult for Miami, especially with the weather. You don't think that they're going to want to attack way down the field as much either with the possible snow and with it being cold. So lots of short stuff to Kelsey.
Exactly. So I played the over 56.5 for Kelsey. Now, another big thing you mentioned is obviously Mozart not potentially hurt. Even if he goes, I don't think he's going to be 100%. And this really does hurt the Dolphins offense just because they have been so good running the ball. They're running the ball over 5 times more per game this year than last year. And I know everyone's high on Achane. Achane's not built to touch the ball 20 times rushing. Mozart is. And if he's not able to do that, I don't see a path for Miami being able to win. And also, I know Tyreek Hill, a lot of people love him. Is it just me, or is there any time there's a big play, he's always on the sidelines? Anytime it's a crucial point of the game, he's on the sidelines.
How many times this year in a row have we seen him limping off the field, walking off the field? They're not great on third down. They're like most of my notes in this, they're not even incredibly positive KC, but they're just very anti-Miami. That's the problem when I was handicapping this game. Last week, they got shut out in the second half. They had 47 total yards in that game. Their drives went 3 and punt, 4 plays, punt, and then that punt got returned for a touchdown. 3 plays and punt, 4 plays and interception. They're 1-5 this year against teams that finished with the winning record. The only team they beat was the Cowboys, and they had to go on a game-winning drive in that game. They should have lost that game if Dallas scores on their opening drive when Pollard doesn't fumble the ball going into the end zone there. They haven't won a playoff game since 2000, and defensively, they're number 19 DVOA, number 22 versus the pass, number 16 versus the rush. I just think this is going to be more of a slow defensive game with the way the weather is. And right now, if they had 3 or 4 of their defensive players back with Fangio, then sure, I think they could be more competitive in this game. But unfortunately, they don't have that right now. And on offense, they're probably not going to be able to use their speed. And their speedy guys aren't even 100% healthy right now.
Yeah. And, Waddle's coming back from a soft tissue. Cold weather and soft tissue doesn't mix well. Same with Tyreek Hill. Tua, you mentioned it. He's only in his career, he's got 2 wins over a team with a winning record. The Bills last season, you mentioned the Cowboys this season. He just can't win these big games. Does poorly against pressure. I think Chris Jones is going to be living in the backfield. You mentioned the offensive line injuries. Look, I'm never one to lay points here, but I actually took the Chiefs here at -4. Even at 4.5, I think the Chiefs win this game.
See, what I would maybe do in the situation like this, and that's how I normally play because I'm not playing the Dolphins at any spot in this. I was trying to figure out, do I want to lay it with the Chiefs? I would probably play an adjusted line myself, just from a value-based standpoint, because I like the Chiefs in this. I'll play the Kelsey prop like you were pointing out. I might even try to adjust this to like 10 and see if we can get it to double digits and just have this be a bigger one, because I don't like the matchup for Miami at all in here. And you know what? For as bad as their season has been, the Chiefs were the number 5 team in DVOA, number 8 offense, number 8 passing, number 17 rushing. They're the number 7 defense, number 5 against the pass. Their offensive line, they've been up and down this year, but only 4 opponents managed to score more than 20 points against them. They had the second best scoring defense in the league with 17.1 points per game, and they led the league in drop passes this year. They left a lot of meat on the bone. They had Kansas City with all those mistakes. That might be who they are. They might be a team that's just a little bit sloppy, but if they play a game or two where they just clean up a few of the penalties, they don't turn the ball over as much because they execute a little more efficiently, this team has a little bit more of a ceiling than they showed in the regular season. So we're both leaning. Erik's already got him locked in. I'm definitely looking for the best way to play the Chiefs in here. I think I will for sure play a first half Chiefs in this game, and then maybe see how I'll play it from there. But intriguing as you have the Tyreek Hill trade teams. You've got these 2 teams who played each other earlier in the year, 2 teams with fantastic offenses, but the way the weather is in this game at only a total of 44, who knows if we're going to get big scoring. And that might be the same thing for our next game, Erik, because on Sunday, this game should have 15-mile-per-hour winds and snow. And the total is only 34 for the Steelers at the Bills. This number has been bouncing around 10. I did lock it in when it was at 10 on the Pittsburgh side, and only because that's a massive, massive number in what could be really bad weather in a game where Pittsburgh could be down by 16, 17, get a garbage time score late, and I could cover this game. Pittsburgh has not actually won a playoff game since 2016. They come off of beating the Ravens last week. Remember, the Ravens had already clinched, though, and they sat a bunch of their players. What we've seen from Pittsburgh recently, they've run the ball well. Najee Harris had 112 yards last week on 26 carries. He's now had back-to-back 100-yard games for the first time in his career. Now, the big concern with this Steelers team is the Watt injury. Grade 3 MCL sprain. He was the league leader this year in sacks after getting a couple more against Baltimore. And you just look at this team again, and it's coaching. Tomlin, he's now won 10 games 10 times as a Steelers head coach. Just a few weeks ago, there's all this turmoil. They lost to a couple of bad teams in back-to-back weeks. I think the Cardinals and the Patriots. And then they had to get rid of Claypool earlier in the year. Pickens is not doing well. Everyone's talking about how they're probably going to get rid of him. He's angry on the sidelines, talking about how he doesn't want to block for people. And then boom, they win a few games and they're in the playoffs again. Every time it feels like Tomlin's losing control, he just flips it right back the other way. And Rudolph, he's been a nice surprise for them. He's won 3 games. He played really well in the first 2. Last week, he was not good at all, though. His numbers looked okay. He had a couple fumbles, but he was not making big plays. One pass that went 71 yards, and he had 152 yards in the game, by far his worst of the 3 starts this year. But one thing he does do that their other quarterbacks didn't do, he takes deep shots. And you have to do that. We're seeing the teams that we've talked about so far, Stroud, Flacco. Nowadays, you have to be able to take a deep shot. You don't have to do it over and over and over again, but you have to be able to keep the defenses on their toes. Otherwise, it becomes too easy to defend you. And these coordinators and these coaches are too smart. So that's what's nice about what Rudolph has done. They scored 30 points in weeks 16 and 17, back-to-back times for the first time since weeks 5 and 6 of 2020. And my concern, their defense is a little banged up, but you know what? They're getting back Fitzpatrick, it looks like, from IR, and Kazee from suspension. They're just the 5th team in NFL history to win 10-plus games and have a point differential of negative 20 or worse. They're actually the only team this year in the playoffs that has a negative point differential. Talk to us about this game, Erik. Steelers and Bills.
So Steelers 1-10 straight up with no Watt. Obviously, this goes back to the 32% ATS spread trend that I mentioned with a first-time playoffs guy getting his first playoff start versus a veteran, Mason Rudolph versus Josh Allen. The thing with this run the Bills has been on, there's only been one game where you kind of sit back, and that was the Cowboys game where they just played really well. You know what I mean? So part of me kind of feels that they are due for a good game. Another part of me looks at it like this. Major weather concerns, huge mile-per-hour winds, and I'm going back to that game that New England played at Buffalo where they just ran the ball every play but one. And I look at the Steelers' defense. They give up the most rushing yards per game of the playoff teams remaining, 96.4 yards. You look at their last 3 games. Edwards, 4.8 yards per carry. Walker, 5.3 yards per carry. Joe Mixon, 3.9 yards per carry. Just kind of looking at that, and then I looked at the trend where James Cook's rushing attempts, ever since Brady took over, they went from 12 attempts a game to 17 attempts a game. He went from averaging 61.5 yards a game to 72.4 yards a game. With all that being said, that took me to play the James Cook over rushing yards of 65.5. I just feel with how the wind is going to be and how the weather is going to be, this is going to be a game that's a ground and pound type game. Both teams leaning on the run. And I just kind of trust the Bills defense to be able to do a better job stopping the run than the Steelers defense just because of no Watts there. If I were to play a side, obviously I'd probably take the Steelers, and I'd probably look to take the under here just because with how the weather report is going. That's a lot of points, I know, to be scored in that crappy of position. So yeah, I'm taking James Cook here over the 65.5. In terms of side with the weather, it's really hard for me to get involved in anything.
Couple other things to mention. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really high on Pittsburgh. To me, it's just a lot about the spot and how big that number is. And you were kind of pointing out a few things about the Bills. They should have lost to the Chargers and the Patriots. They looked so bad in those games. They were 5-0 down the stretch. They won at Kansas City, Dallas, and Miami. The thing is, they moved the ball well last week, 280 yards, and they went inside the 35-yard line of Miami 4 times in the first half, but they only had 7 points, and they're down by 7. Heading into the fourth quarter, they had 5 possessions of 50-plus yards and still just 7 points. And then they get a punt return touchdown at the start of the fourth quarter to tie it, and it really flipped the game. But Allen threw interceptions on their first 2 drives. He now has 18 on the season. That's a career high. He's been great. I mean, but in week 16 through 18, for example, he's graded quarterback number 21. 7 turnover-worthy plays to go along with 7 big-time throws. They just have to clean things up. They dominated that box score last week. They have a lot of recent drops. They have 24 on the season, 16 drops between weeks 10 through 17. That's what's scary to play this team, needing them to cover by 10. All those turnovers, all those drops, how many times they move the ball, and then for some reason they just get a little stagnant. Their ceiling is so high. I love playing them. Like in a game straight up against the Ravens, I'd probably play them as a dog because I think that would be a game Josh Allen could really get up for. And I like them in a getting point situation, but giving, they're just, especially a big number, they're not the type of team I love to play. So yeah, I'm on the Steelers side here. I locked this one in at plus 10. The Bills though, this year at home, 7-1, average margin of victory, 14.8 points per game. But they're only 4-4 against the spread at home. You mentioned James Cooks, the last 4 games averaging 20 touches a game. Maybe he's someone you look to play, insert into some of your DFS lineups there. Number 3 overall DVOA this year was the Buffalo Bills. 9.5-point favorites right now up on DRF Sportsbook. Erik, let's go Packers at the Cowboys. Cowboys are currently a 7-point favorite in this game. Over under is 50.5. Start us off on this one. Talk to us about how you see this game playing out.
Well, first of all, can we just give Matt LaFleur some credit here? There was 4 teams that didn't have a player selected to the Pro Bowl. Panthers 2-15, worst record in the league. Patriots 4-13, second worst record in the league. The Commanders 4-13, tied for the second worst record in the league. The fourth one was the Packers at 9-8. The last time that a team made the playoffs that had 0 Pro Bowlers was Seattle in 2010. This team is the youngest team in the league and the youngest team in the last 6 years. 6-2 last 8 games with wins over the Chiefs and Lions to make the playoffs. Playoff game last week, not the prettiest of game, but got the job done and won it against your rival. His 5 years in Green Bay, 57 and 56 and 27, 68% win percentage, 4 playoff appearances, and the year that the Packers didn't make it came down to the final game when they lost to the Detroit Lions, that Sunday Night Football game. I just think LaFleur doesn't get enough credit amongst people with how good of a coach he is, and that kind of goes into my thought process of this game because what's
funny, it's we've seen recently too. I'm not going to get into him, but some of the specifics about it. But Aaron Rodgers might not have always been the easiest person to coach and to deal with. And now we're seeing, and he may have gone off script a whole lot, right?
Oh, he did. He led the league in audibles when he was there. And let's just kind of look at it. I mean, everyone was saying how the Jets were going to be this team. Jets, shockingly, didn't make the playoffs again. They kept their whole coaching staff, which is going to be a nightmare. They're going to struggle again next year. And now you have the Packers, who are in the playoffs, young quarterback, young playmakers around him. Which franchise would you better be? It's amazing when you eliminate Aaron Rodgers from the equation, how much better the situation gets. That's all I'm going to say about Aaron Rodgers. In terms of this game, I'm not a big fan of this Cowboys team. I think they're going to have a hard time generating stops. This whole defense is schemed to generate pressure, and one of the best in the league at avoiding pressure is Jordan Love because of how good his footwork is, moving to his right and moving backwards. Also, they can be run on. Any team that has tried to be physical up front with the front line of the Cowboys has had its success. This has been in the Cowboys' Achilles heel for the last 2 years. Packers are going to have a healthy A.J. Dillon. They're going to have Jones. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. And when the Cowboys have the ball, I think the Packers are just going to double CD and just force the rushing game to beat them. And we've talked about it before. Pollard's not a guy that can carry the ball 20 times a game, and they're insanely missing Zeke Elliott. They only rushed for 1,920 yards this season, averaging only 4.1 yards per game. This was their lowest total since 2020. For how bad the Packers' rush defense is, I don't think the Cowboys will be able to generate the ball on the ground.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to attack the Packers' real weakness here. They just haven't been a good running team all year long. They haven't been proficient running. They're trying to do the short pass stuff early in the year, what they were doing. But I completely agree with you. But that was a main point when I was looking at this matchup. It just doesn't feel like the Cowboys are going to be able to exploit the Packers' main weakness.
No, just because their run blocking's been offered, and Pollard's not a guy. They're missing Zeke. Then I think also a team, when you play the Cowboys, because they do have CD, and let's face it, CD could go off. But if you double him and force the other guys to beat you, I could see a path to winning. Also, with how good the Packers' offense is, their offense is good enough where they can keep up with them. So I think that's important.
So just to point on what you were saying there, offense since week 10, the Packers, number 4 DVOA overall in offense. Since week 11, so 8 total games, Jordan Love, graded quarterback, number 1. He has 20 big-time throws, 7 turnover-worthy plays, 18 touchdowns and 1 interception during this stretch, and only 3 fumbles. So 4 turnovers in the last 8 games, in addition to all of those big-time throws. And you know what? They beat up the Bears a lot more than the scoreboard said last week. They had 432 total yards in that game. The Bears had 192. They had a 7.2 yards per play. The Bears had 4.2. Packers went 7 of 10 on third down. It was a really clean game for them. Only 1 penalty. The key is, like you said, their defense. In weeks 14 through 16, the Giants scored 24, Tampa scored 34, and Bryce Young in Carolina scored 30 against them. But they have made some adjustments over the last few weeks. They only allowed 19 points over the last 2 weeks combined and only 1 touchdown. And that touchdown came when the Vikings had to go 7 yards after a muffed punt. They had 9 sacks in those 2 games. 9 different players registered at least a half a sack. This is the youngest team in the NFL this year. This is the 5th youngest team since the 1970 merger to make the playoffs. And it's not surprising that they have an up and down year. They're just a young team, Eric. They're going to go up and down. They started 2-1, should have been 3-0. Then they lose 4 in a row, so they're 2-5. Then they win 3 in a row. They're up to 6-6, and they become the hot, buzzy team. And then they lay an egg. They lose back-to-back bad games. Then they flip it around and win 3 in a row to make the playoffs. So it has been a crazy roller coaster ride. But now I'm looking at them. Okay, their defense the last couple of games has been a little better. Now their quarterback has been excellent. We really like their coach and what he's doing with this offense, and they've got a bunch of playmakers. They don't have like a number 1 wide receiver, but they've got Reed, Wicks, Musgrave, Kraft, Watson, Dobbs. They've got 6 or 7 guys that are all like top 3 kind of receivers. And now Aaron Jones is healthy again. Since week 15, he leads the league in rushing. 411 rushing yards. Last week, he had 22 carries for 111 yards. He gained positive EPA on 50% of his carries. That was the highest percentage in a game this year when he's had at least 10 carries. They didn't have a rusher in the first 14 weeks past 100 yards, and Jones has gone over 100 all of the last 3 games in a row. They just seem like they're coming into this game playing really well, playing really balanced, Erik. I was able to get 7.5 here, but I'm fine at 7 or over anything on at the touchdown or over.
Yeah, I got 7.5. Absolutely love it. I know people are going to point out that Dak is 20 and 10, laying 7 points or more. But if you take out the Commanders and the Giants, only 7, 5, and 1. And then if you just look at the playoffs, he's only 1 and 5 ATS. I really think that the Packers have a huge coaching advantage here, and LaFleur is going to be able to scheme his way to a win here and be able to create better matchups to take advantage. Also, this Cowboys defense plays an insane amount of man, and the Packers have just been electric this year against man. I like the Packers here plus the 7.5. I like it at 7. I'd sprinkle probably a little bit on the money line too.
I agree. I'm with you. A couple notes on the Cowboys before we move on. 3rd straight 12-win season for them. 8-0 this year at home, 6-2 against the spread, and they've had a monster margin of victory. They've won 16 straight games at home over the last 2 seasons, but not against very good opponents. Dak got into a nice rhythm last week. Lamb has been awesome. He had 13 catches last week. You know, he's the first player in league history to have 7 different games with 11-plus catches in a single season. McCarthy versus his old team. Another thing that you pointed out to me a few years ago, and I've noticed this, a lot of these cornerbacks or players in the secondary, safeties that have a bunch of interceptions, those players get a lot of the credit because people see the interception or they'll see a pick six, but a lot of times those are very boom or bust players. They get those interceptions because they cheat a lot and they make a decision. And that's exactly what has happened with Bland. So Bland has 5 pick sixes this year. He leads the outside corners in lowest EPA allowed as the nearest defender because of those. But he also allows 1.5 yards per coverage snap, which was the worst outside corner with at least 250 cover snaps. So because of the interceptions, the EPA is high. But if you're just grading him on play to play, he's not fantastic. He's someone that you can actually attack and go after. There are some weaknesses on this team too. They are dead last in defensive rushing success rate. The Cowboys, dead last. They have allowed 44% of plays this year to be graded successful. So now we know that the Packers have a balanced offense. They're running the ball well. They could do that with Jones here. Sets up some play action for some deep shots down the field where Love has been really good, and they can attack guys like Bland who haven't been as good as some of the numbers might have suggested. This might be my favorite of the games this week. Just a strong opinion. I think the Packers are coming into this well. I like the Packers in here too. I'm with you, Erik. Oh, Erik, how did it happen this way? We got to go heads up against each other with the Rammies and the Lions. I thought the Rams were going to be terrible this year. You talked me off the ledge when we did our preview shows. You said they're going to be better than you think, and they were a lot better. And the Lions had a fantastic year. The Lions, it's just the second 12-win season in franchise history, hosting their first playoff game since 1993. They're in their first playoff game since 2016. They get the monkey off the back. Incredible year. They win the division. And then they got to see their ex, someone they love, Matt Stafford, one of the greatest Lions of all time, has to come back here and play in a home game for the Lions. He never even played in this stadium as a Lion in the playoffs.
Yeah. It breaks my heart to do this. It breaks my heart. We all know how this game's going to end. Stafford, last minute drive for a field goal or a touchdown to win it. Lions are 1 DVOA versus the run. So on paper, that's a pretty tough matchup for Kenron Williams, who's been great. But let's look how he's done against the other top 10 DVOA rushing defense he's played against. 25 attempts for $114 against the Ravens, 21 attempts for 88 against the Browns. So in both games, averaging 4 yards a carry. last 3 games to close out, averaging 23 attempts, buck 14 on the ground, averaging 5 yards per game per carry. If the Rams are able to run the ball, this Lions defense is showing us that they can't generate enough stops in the passing game to win a game. And I think the Rams are going to have some success here running the ball with Kyren Williams. Obviously, that's going to open stuff up for Cooper Kupp and Puka. This Lion, to me, I know the Lions can score, but playoff football is all about being able to manage defense. And to me, this Lions, and I know everyone likes Aaron Glenn, he's a hot name in terms of coaches. His defense just doesn't generate enough stops, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Also, I think that
they're 29th in EPA per pass play.
Yeah.
You know, they rank pretty well in some of the DVOA metrics. They're 13th in defense. They're 16th versus the pass. They're actually really good defending the run. They're number 8 in defensive rushing success rate, number 4 in defensive EPA allowed, which is funny. They actually have the best rushing success rate, or the best rushing EPA defensively among any of the playoff teams. So that's one of the places they grade well. But watching it with the eye test, it doesn't match some of the numbers against the better teams, right?
You don't see it at all.
No.
I mean, look, I played the 3.5. Also, the other thing that just doesn't make sense to me is there's this old saying, don't poke the bear. Why the hell are the Lions not allowing Detroit Lions Matt Stafford jerseys? That makes absolutely zero sense. Who cares? You're still wearing a Lions jersey. You know what I mean? It's not like you're wearing a Rams jersey there. You're still wearing a Detroit Lions jersey.
And because the guy the guy was good for you. You don't want to be in a situation where he comes out, you cheer him, and then you boo him in the game, but you don't want to make it about him or about something other than the game. And then you got this good energy, especially with what happened against the Lions against the Cowboys a few weeks ago. There's this really good groundswell for the Lions. People like them. They want to see them do well. You're right. It's kind of a weird thing. And I, as a fan, as a bettor, I'm frustrated because I actually think both of these two teams would be live in their next game against the good teams in the NFC. Because I think both of these two teams match up well they have a well-built offense that they can score with the 49ers, right? They can go up and down with them. So I'm a little bummed that they run into each other here. And what do we know about Laporta?
He's done. He's not going to be playing.
No. And even if he's playing, that injury is a multiple week injury.
Here's the thing. Sure. Like, for everyone saying like starters should sit, I think you got to play your starters at least for a half there. And it was a fluke thing. I'm always going to be for it, playing your starters, especially if you're a team like the Lions, who are the Detroit Lions. And I'm a Lions fan, to be sitting out people in a game. They haven't done enough. You need reps. You need to be hot, especially the way the game the week before ended with the Cowboys. Also, Jared Goff's point of view, he can look to get his revenge. But when I look at it and I look at the coaching, to me, this game is going to be Campbell's going to be too aggressive at one point. That's going to cost the Lions. I really think that could happen. McVay.
If I think that does happen, I think it will happen next week. I feel like it's got to be against the Cowboys. We're going to get it against the Cowboys. If they play the Cowboys, there's going to be a spot in the game where that same thing kind of happens and he has to make a decision or two. And man, I'm with you. Like, it could be great in this particular game. Compare the two coaches. Campbell is very aggressive. McVay is not at all. McVay's a really, really conservative coach when it comes to going forward on fourth down. So you could get a bunch of extra possessions, extra downs to work with in a game like this. It could really benefit you, or it could flip the other way, and it could be the thing that really impacts the Lions. I don't know if enough people realize what a good year Stafford had this year. He was graded quarterback number 7 on the season. He was fantastic at limiting turnover-worthy plays. He had one of the lowest turnover-worthy play percentages in the league. That was something he always struggled at.
Yeah.
Because he's one of those guys who has a great arm. So he'll take some shots, but that's what you want from him. He'll have some turnovers, but you build it in because he's so good down the field. And this year he's been really, really clean. They were the number 3rd team offensively in DVOA from weeks 10 through 17. Since week 10, they're averaging 29.9 points per game, and they have games against Cleveland and Baltimore in there and San Francisco, but that was the 49ers backup, so we don't have to necessarily count that one. My biggest concern now as a fan of the Rams, their special teams is awful, Eric. That is a real concern in good games now. They were 32 DVOA. They made a kicker change, and then their new kicker, they bring in Marr. He misses an extra point. They've missed 16 kicks this year. That's a kick a game between field goals and extra points. That's the most in the league. And then they've allowed 500 punt return yards and 2 returns for touchdowns. One of them cost them a game against Baltimore, a punt return touchdown in overtime. Yep. So you're bad at kicking. You're bad at return coverage, and then their return units haven't been very good at all. So example, against the Giants in week 17, they missed 2 extra points, and they allowed a 94-yard punt return in the 4th quarter. And they should have lost that game.
Yep.
If things like that happen in any game for them, they're going to lose. But if they're clean, this team can beat any team. They're that good. Their offense is number 7. They're top 10 in passing and in rushing. Defensively, they're below average on a lot of metrics, but they're not awful. Like, you can't really gash them. And they do have Aaron Donald still, who will still put a lot of pressure on the quarterback and still draws a lot of attention from opposing defenses. For the Rams this year, they were 5-3-1 against the spread on the road. The over went 9-8 in their games. Man, just want to give the Lions a little more credit again, too. 4 different players with 10 scrimmage touchdowns this year. That was the second most by any team in a single season in history. Laporta, Montgomery, Gibbs, St. Brown. You've got 2 running backs, your tight end, and your wide receiver, all with double-digit touchdowns. That's really, really impressive. And Goff, I mentioned the great year for Stafford. He graded number 7. Goff graded number 6. He had a bad stretch of games, week 11, 12, and 14. He played poorly in week 7 against Baltimore. Other than that, he had a really good year. He had 17 turnover-worthy plays throughout the year, and 10 of those came in 4 games. Those 4 games that I mentioned, where he just wasn't very good. He was also a little bit unlucky in those games. There were 8 drops from wide receivers. The over went 11-6 in Lions games this year. They were 5-3 against the spread at home. This team scored 30 or more points 9 times this year. And since their 5-game losing streak, last year they're 1-6. You know, they're 20-7, and they have not lost 2 games in a row.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. You lose, you get back up for the next week. Really, really impressive stuff. And hey, you know, at least one of our teams is moving along. I'm sad that we're going heads up against each other, but this is the most intriguing game, I think, of the weekend, from the storylines, the trade, and just what a good football game it could be. And we see that with the total. It's 51.5.
Yeah, as a potential to blow out. I mean, I think both these defenses could struggle to generate some stops. But at the end of the day, you know, Aaron Donald's still there. I think he's going to be able to get home against Goff. I trust Raheem Morris more than I trust Aaron Glenn, and I trust Sean McVay more than I trust Ben Johnson. Also, I did do the player prop. Look, I did Cooper Kupp over 68.5 yards. Kupp runs 60% of his routes out of the slot. Lions give up the 5th most yards to opposing slot wide receivers. Lions do run a pass funnel system, which explains them being so good against the run. So the middle of the field is open, which explains why they do have trouble defending the slot. For all opposing wide receivers, Lions gave up the 3rd most yards per game. So obviously, like we talked about, they can be thrown on. Kupp only playing 12 games, 2nd in targets, 16% target share, averaging 7.9 targets per game. I really think, I know Puka had a great season, but in games like this, this is what Stafford does, is just lean on Cooper Kupp. So I'll take him over 68.5. And look, as much as it pains me to say this, I'm on the Rams plus the 3.5. I got him at 3.5. At 3, I'd wait. I think the 3.5 will come back up.
Yeah, the key is the number here. At 3.5, I think it makes this playable. At 3, even I would be okay if you want to play the Rams. If this was under a field goal, I wouldn't play it. I think you need the 3 here in what's a really fun game on paper. And this is the Sunday night football game. Let's go to Monday night. So this will be the second year that we've had the Monday night games, right? Did they just start last year? It's only been a couple years where we've done these Monday night
football. One was the Rams against the Cardinals.
So there we go. A couple years ago, 2 years ago when the Rammies won it. Yeah. So I guess this will be the third year where they're doing the Monday night football playoff games. We have the Eagles. We have the Bucks. This is the fourth straight year that Tampa has made the playoffs. Man, I'm giving you a lot of credit this podcast because, again, you had a really good year with some of your previews, especially some of the teams that you thought were projected too low, like Tampa. You thought they would be better than they were, and they absolutely were. You were pointing out they have a lot of players still from winning teams, especially on the defense. And then Baker Mayfield came in, and he had some really good highs for them this year. He struggled in spots, but it was a good version of Baker because he had some games where he just toughed it out. He made some nice plays for them. They started the season 3-1. So all of a sudden, we thought that they were going to be one of the worst teams, and then we thought they were okay. And then they lose 4 in a row. So then they're 3-5, and they were 4-7. And a 4-game win streak from weeks 13 to 16 completely flipped their season. During that stretch, they averaged 28.5 points per game, and Baker had 9 touchdowns and just 1 interception. And the defense allowed only 18.8 points per game. Overall, they won 5 of their last 6, but their last 2 games, they scored only a combined 22 points. Baker's ribs are banged up. He had an ankle injury. He's coming off the worst game of the year last week for him, where he actually graded quarterback number 32 on the week. And I think it was bad weather. They weren't trying to lose the game. They weren't taking shots. They just wanted to play it safe against Carolina, get off the field, and get into the playoffs. And that's what happened. And I will say, this is a fantastic spot for them to be hosting a home game against the team that comes into the playoffs struggling more than any other team. If you could handpick any of the teams in the playoffs to play, you probably would have picked the Eagles the way they're coming into the playoffs right now. So this Tampa team did lose to the Eagles earlier in the year, and they're 3-5 against the spread at home, 1-2 against the spread as a home dog, and only 1-5 against playoff teams this year. That win came against the Packers a few weeks ago. One key for them, they got to try to run the ball a little bit. They finished with only 87 rushing yards per game, Eric. That was 31st in the league. And they averaged only 3.4 yards per carry. That was 32nd in the league. They went for under 100 yards in 12 games this year rushing. But they are a 3-point home dog in here. The Eagles, even with all their struggles, they are a 3-point favorite on the road. Talk to us about the Eagles at the Bucks.
This game's hard for me because what I heard is that Mayfield's more banged up than people know. Ankle legitimately shot, shoulder legitimately hurt. If he's not able to throw the ball, this is really going to hurt the Bucks' ability to take advantage of the Eagles' woes defending the tight end. I was looking at some Cade Ogden props and defending Evans and Godwin. If he can't throw the ball, their passing game's done. And you're going to lean on Rashard White when you've been the worst rushing team this year. So when this is at 2.5, I kind of bought the rumor that Mayfield was banged up because obviously if Trask goes last minute, what's this number, 7? 6? This number is going to completely balloon up just because there's a huge drop from Kyle Trask to Baker Mayfield. So obviously that's why I locked in the 2.5. In terms of the Eagles, A.J. Brown did not practice yesterday. I don't know about his status today. We're recording this Friday, the 12th. And Hurts' finger, not as bad as we thought. He's going to be able to throw the ball. The Bucks do give up the second most rushing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks. Hurts is a great play in terms of DFS just because the Bucks also really do struggle defending opposing wide receivers. I don't know if AJ Brown is going, but I'm definitely going to be looking at AJ Brown or Devontae Smith receiving yard props over just because of the Bucs struggle and Hurts not being as banged up as we think. I took the -2.5. We saw this last year with the Cowboys. The Cowboys played the Commanders, looked awful, lost the Commanders, went into Tampa Bay and completely boat raced the Bucs to win that game. I think the Eagles are going to win this game big against the Bucs. I don't trust the Bucs secondary. I don't just trust the Bucs front four to be able to generate enough pressure. I think this is a get right spot for the Eagles. I think the Eagles are going to have success running the ball. Bucs defense isn't as good defending the run as they've been in years past. And I mentioned back four, they have given up the fourth most yards to opposing wide receivers. So I think Smith and Brown are going to be able to throw it. Plus, this extra day of reps really does like Jalen Hurts. I think the Eagles are able to survive one more week, and then we'll lose next week.
Yeah, just some notes on the Eagles. I agree with you. This is a stay away game for me, too. I don't really have the strongest opinion here. With the chance to win the division last week, they are playing their starters and they get down 24-0. That was just such a weird situation. They needed the Cowboys to lose, and the Cowboys are actually in a tight game early there. They start the season 10-1. They're getting some lucky bounces, and in some games they didn't look incredibly impressive. But here's the difference, though, Eric. We compare them, and a lot of people are doing this, to last year's Vikings, right? The difference is, through a lot of the metrics with the Eagles, they still have been a top third to top half team. Offensively, they've still graded well by a lot of advanced metrics. Defensively is where they've recently gotten really, really bad. And last year, the Vikings, they were just bad all over, and every single thing was bouncing their way. I thought there was a little bit of a difference, but wow, did things completely flip for the Eagles, because since week 9, they're 31st in defensive EPA per play. So by EPA per play allowed and by success rate, they are the worst defense of teams in the playoffs. Number 29 against the pass, number 29 against the run in DVOA. But they're still number 14 overall. So it does show you that they're not a bad football team. They've just had some holes and some real weaknesses lately. You know about one of them, Eric. Matt Patricia. He's their defensive play caller right now. So based on EPA per play, since he took over, they've been twice as bad as they were earlier in the year. It's like double as bad as they were defensively. They've lost 5 of their last 6. 2 in a row were the last 2 were Arizona and Giants. No excuses in those games. 6th team in NFL history to enter the playoffs, having lost 5 of their last 6. They've trailed for more game time in their last 6 games than they did in weeks 1 through 12 combined. This is the 5th worst point differential in NFL history by a team with 11 plus wins. All that being said, at 3 or under, I'd have a hard time not playing the Eagles in this game. I really do agree with you and think this is a spot where they get up for it. They play better. And if Baker's not Tampa
isn't 100,
then they're done. Then they're in really big trouble, because he needs to be not only 100%, but you need a good Baker game for them, for this team to be a good team. If you don't get a good Baker game for them, then like you pointed out, their defense isn't incredible enough like a few years ago to where we can lean on them. Their defense was ranked 14th in DVOA. They're 14th against the pass. They're number 8 against the run. So they're fine. They're like a slightly above average defense. Monday Night Football. Eagles 3-point favorite on the road at Tampa. Eric, I didn't even ask you this, but I'm going to kind of put you on the spot. Did you play any futures right now before the playoffs? Or if not, were there any teams that you may look at a price and think, yeah, you know what? I could play them. Is there anything playoff wide that you took a shot at, or what are some of your futures maybe that you're leaning on now?
The only 2 futures I have that are still alive are, I have the Browns at 35-1, and then I did take the Bills at 50-1 when they were 6-6. So I have those 2 going. The ones right now that I'd look at are all on the NFC side, just because I feel I have two
Me
on the
too.
AFC. Eagles 18-1. Maybe I'm a homer, but the Lions 18
Well,
to
see,
1 for the
I
Rams.
think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to play both the Rams and Lions a little bit for the two of them, because I actually, like I said, I think the winner of that game can win their next game because they'll both play different teams. If the Lions win, they'll go and probably play the Cowboys, or they'll host the Packers. So I
Yep.
think that that they will match up. We just saw them in that game against the Cowboys. They'll really have, you know, get up for that game after everything that happened and all the drama with the 2-point conversion and everything. And for the Rams, I've been saying this since the Rams started to play well in kind of the middle of the season, where you kind of looked at them and thought, oh, you know what? This team has a shot. They're not going to be scared of the 49ers.
No.
They are not. And you know what? For as much as Shanahan has had success against McVay, the 49ers, the Rams beat the 49ers in the playoffs a couple years ago. They had a really good game against them early this year, and that was before Kyron Williams was as big of a part of the offense as he is now. So I think that's a sneaky game that the Rams could go in and play really well against the 49ers there. So I think I'm going to play a little on both the Rams and the Lions, knowing that I'm going to get one of them through the game, and then whomever it is, I like their spot moving forward as a dog.
Yeah, I like that. Couple fun ones. I'm gonna play these ones for small wild card weekend. Plus 550 Matt Stafford to have the most passing yards. And then I'm also gonna take a shot at Cooper Kupp 15-1 to have the most receiving yards, and then James Cook 9-1 to have the most rushing yards.
I was on mute for a second there. Sorry, buddy. Erik, thanks again, my friend. Really appreciate all the hard work. Another season in the books, but we're already into the playoffs, and we've got a lot more NFL to discuss. You and I will be back Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time for NFL Betting Blitz, and we'll do a preview, and we'll have an idea of some injury news, or we'll give you maybe a few other DFS or prop plays there. You and I are recording this one a little bit later this week, so it's Friday. Oh, you'll have your podcast coming out a little bit later on today?
Podcast, yes. Podcast will be coming out a little later, probably around 7 o'clock tonight.
Thank you so much, my friend. Stay warm over there with your crazy weather, and let's crush it this weekend, buddy.
Best of luck, my friend.
Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Let's have a great NFL Super Wild Card weekend.